You're listening to Cancer Convos with Brady and Stacy.
Hey, welcome to another Cancer Convos with Brady and Stacy. Are we sponsored by Stacy? We have a sponsor, don't we?
We do. We actually have one for sure, and then I'm signing another one today. But for sure, we're sponsored by Chelsea Smith Cosmetics.
Yay, Chelsea. And she
Yay.
does wigs and stuff and everything. She's amazing. Well, today we have a special guest, an old friend. We've been she's for she's one of the original six.
Literally, figuratively.
A longtime friend, not an old friend. Longtime friend of the program, Shannon McQuade.
Shannon McQuade. Shannon McQuade Ely. Didn't she change her name? Yeah, she's big time now. She's married up. How are things, Shannon? How are you doing? How you been?
I'm doing all right. It has been a very long time, hasn't it? Since we've seen each other.
Correct. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yes.
I may moved away and everything, but we've been knowing each other since at least 1998, maybe before that. I'm sure. 25 years.
Oh yeah. I think
so Shannon has a special story today. Stacy, you can fill us in a little bit on what's going on.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about our experiences and our experience with cancer. In the last couple of weeks, we've had guests on who have battled different cancers, prostate cancer, lung cancer, various incarnations of cancer. So we've talked a lot about patients, but one of the things we really want to focus on too is families. Like, how do families and friends deal with this? Because they're going through it just like we are, but they're just going through it differently. And so right away I thought of Shannon, because she's been very open with her story, and I know it's not easy to talk about it if you have somebody or love somebody that has cancer. So I figured we bring on Shannon today and see if she can share a little bit of her story so we can get kind of a different perspective on the show today. Shannon, tell us a little bit about your mom.
Yeah, so my mom, just a beautiful, generous woman. We were just like a little bit of her cancer story.
For sure.
She's always had a very good awareness of the fact that her skin was very fair. She had melanoma. Maybe that's what I need to get some better skin. She did have a couple different skin cancer scares about 10 years ago. So she's always been very careful of that. Really no cancer to speak of that has run in our family that we know of, no family history. But a couple of years ago, in the fall of October of 21, we were on a trip with my mom. She's from France, and my twin daughters and my sister to basically go visit my grandma, who at the time was nearly 98 years old. I just noticed some things happening, but she's got this other genetic disease that's got to do with her brain. And I'm thinking, okay, that's getting a little worse. So anyway, long story longer, we go back in that December to basically say goodbye to my grandma for one more time. And, my mom's very exhausted. It's a very difficult trip. She's 74 years old. She's got a lot on her shoulders. My grandmother had passed away about a week after we left her. So a lot of stress. And I just on the way back, I just noticed she's like leaning to the left. And I said, Mom, you weren't really great in October. I really think you should get checked out. My sister was like worried about her. So she went and got an MRI, and they found a tumor. So this is December, like a day after my grandmother passed away. She finds out she has this tumor, and it's fairly significant. And then we waited until January, and it was operable. And the doctors at the time, great staff. However, we were kind of thinking it was the skin cancer can return in the brain, which I didn't know anything about this. So the melanoma could return in the brain. So that's what I'm thinking. That's what my mom's thinking. It'll be something where she was deathly afraid of chemo. And I hate to say deathly afraid, because that's not cool to say either. But
it's okay. I joke about that stuff all the time. I'm like, I would rather die than do this or whatever task. And people are like, that's not funny.
Like, no, really, let's not do that. Yeah. However, I think we were just all really, really shocked to find out. So we pretty much knew the pathology gets, checked out. And a couple days later, it was glioblastoma. So stage 4 brain cancer. It's terminal. she fought it with the operation. It was operable. There's some people that they can't do that.
Right.
You're basically given, you're an extreme case if you're 5 to 7 years. Her age, she was given like 12 to 18 months, and she lasted 13 months. I was very proud of her, but we kind of kept it from her. We kind of kept what the pathology was at first, because she was just determined that, this is something she's going to fight. And I've got the tattoo on me that I made her promise to pinky swear. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, I love that. I do. Yeah, we can.
Like, that's awesome. If I can swear just barely. It's just goddamn pinky swear, Shannon, in her French accent. So
yeah.
She fought it, but a couple months after her, actually, no, 1 month after her brain surgery, she actually had 2 strokes, which had nothing to do with the cancer or anything. Which landed her in a local, basically a retirement home and nursing facility. And, our goal was always to get her back and get her that care. And that was so difficult to get her the 24-hour care because my dad physically is unable to care for her. It just puts a lot of pressure on the caregivers, but just a great staff at the facility she was at. And then it became something where it's like, Mom, this is the best place for you. And she realized that. But she went through, with this kind of brain cancer, you don't have like the chemo that some people think of with breast cancer. It was an oral pill. And then she did do the 33 treatments of radiation treatment at the Bismarck Cancer Center. And they were wonderful, but daily. And that was also very hard on her. But it was just really hard to watch the progression of how the ups and downs of like how hopeful you can be. And there were times where my sister and I were, and my dad and my children are very close to her. They're adult children, but they're very close to her. Just like how she changed because it's the brain. And, she didn't get sick like some people, there's a little bit of that with this particular radiation and chemotherapy, but it was just really hard to see. Well, and then on top of the stroke, I mean, physically she was unable to walk, she'd really like start slouching. So you, as a caregiver, you kind of say, you don't want to liken it, they're not like dogs. Humans are not dogs, right? But it feels like sometimes we're more humane to dogs than we are to humans. And I'm not promoting anything, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I would have taken a different route with my mom. I felt like she was there for quite some time until like maybe the last month of her life. But it's just, you go through all of those stages of emotions, and it's like, what is the right thing to do? Do you keep fighting? Do you let it go? So by the end, our options had kind of run out, and the cancer just moves faster than the progression of the science that can fight it. And that's what happens with glioblastoma. But John McCain is probably our most recent famous human that has had that particular cancer.
I followed your blog, and your mom's goal was she wanted to make it to Christmas, and you guys got to celebrate Christmas with her, so that was awesome.
Yeah. And my stepdaughter just had a baby, and I just, really wish she could have met her great grandson, granted through a stepchild, but still, I mean, she would have felt like he was her great grandson. And so there was all these little milestones that she did hit. And then now she passed away in January, and very peacefully. And it was kind of like, it was crazy because my sister was home. We had just kind of left her sitting vigil, and her friend had kind of taken over for us so that we could take my dad out to eat. Her friend had left. It was literally in the half hour to 20 minute to 30-minute time frame that we were on our way back. And it was like she knew no one was in the room, and that was her time. It's crazy how that happens too.
Yeah.
How old was she?
She had just turned 75 in August, and she passed away, and so a young older.
Yeah.
But with this cancer, I think you can fight it a little longer when you're a younger human. I would, but it's terminal. I mean, I think it's very rare if you make it to 3 years, let alone 5.
So now I know when I was diagnosed with cancer, my first thought is, how am I going to tell my kids, and how am I going to tell my friends, and how am I going to tell people? So I wonder what your reaction was when you got the news. What did you think? How do you comprehend it?
so that's the crazy thing, right? So my sister and I had the conversation with the brain surgeon, and he was the one who said likely it's this kind of cancer, and he told us that, and I was just shocked. I mean, I didn't accept the news. I bawled. I was like, what? I mean, I think I was just so much, my brain was like, well, yeah, this is going to be something she can fight, and it's going to suck because she's going to have to go through the illness of, the chemo and everything, but she can fight it. And when he basically said, well, we don't know for sure, but because it was the tumor was not, it didn't look like something that had returned from a previous skin cancer. And so keeping that from my mom and just like allowing her to have that hope, that
Yeah.
lasted for quite some time. And that was what was kind of like really tough, because my sister lives in California, and she did her best to come back as often as she could. She's got two younger kids. So it was not easy on her, whether you're the caregiver that's there or a caregiver who's away and trying to maintain things, and knowing you can't always be there when you want to be. That's difficult. But it was really shocking. Telling my kids was really tough. And then finally, the meeting and appointment we had regarding the pathology with the doctor, my mom was in the room, and I don't know that she quite comprehended it even when she heard it from the doctor. The doctors are always very positive, but I don't, so
Yeah.
it's just kind of interesting how, I mean, again, they did a great job, but they didn't like shoot it to a straight necessarily. The brain surgeon did. And so, there wasn't like the immediate answers that people want. I'm sure you guys went through that too. It's just like, well, I want to know, like, what do I have to do to get to this stage? And they're just, everybody's different and everybody reacts different. And my mom was a trooper. I mean, because she had these two strokes on top of it a month later,
Yeah.
we had to wait. And at first we were like, nope, you got to get the treatment right away if you want to survive at all. And then we have to wait. It just made zero sense. But she healed kind of from that, got stronger, did some physical therapy, and then went through the radiation, and which made her a little weaker again, and then kind of did it all over again. And 13 months for someone her age, I was pretty much kind of the top of the scale. So I was very proud of her. She's got a little feisty, and that's sometimes good too.
Do you? I know you said she had the skin cancer, but did they say anything if you would have caught it earlier, or is that just something that time?
It's no, not with this particular kind of brain
Yeah.
cancer. I think the one thing that, like I said, it was operable, so it was on the edge of, like, kind of near the skull, where some people, if it's in the center, it's inoperable. It just so much, it grows so fast compared to what the chemo and the radiation and the operation can do to kill it off.
Yeah.
So she had multiple MRIs, and then after the radiation, we had kind of a scare where we thought it would be any day now. And she lasted another several months because, the way that the radiation works, it just takes some time. And it's like, all this stuff takes time. And then you're like, but we don't have it. And then it's just,
Yep.
that's kind of the roller coaster. She seemed like, I don't want to say at peace with it. She clearly, but there wasn't anything. I mean, I love my mom. We've always had a very open relationship. She's always kind of told me what she thought. There wasn't anything like left unsaid, but there was that time to, where there was that time to spend with her, where if we wanted to say anything to each other, we could. And so I had a very good friend of mine whose mom passed away, suddenly. And you don't know, like, do you want to watch your family suffer, or do you want to deal with the immediate, or like, God, I would have done this differently. So
Right.
it's just these roller coasters of emotions, and I just didn't want to see her suffering. And I know my dad was very, he thought she was suffering. The thing was that she was never in pain with this kind of cancer. So her suffering was, she was a very smart human being, and her suffering is when she couldn't get her words out. I mean, she speaks
Yeah.
with an accent, but better English than some of us. I'm screwing up sleep time medications with the skin cancer.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that was the most frustrating thing for her is, she knew her brain wasn't working in the way she wanted it to. But it was really neat. I mean, her short-term memory kind of got lost there, but she had very good long-term memory. So, just watch things, her and my dad kind of just have some moments. I tried to write some things down, ask her some things, and write those things down. I'm not very good at journaling or anything like that, so that was a little like I had to make sure I did that. And
Right.
right now, I would say my kids and I can't speak for anyone else, but we talk about, I mean, just still in the state of denial, like,
Yeah.
like it's not real. And it was such a whirlwind that I've never really sat and thought about it, my emotions just yet. So the
Well, I think
total
sometimes
complete
you just
breakdown hasn't
you
happened.
don't want to. You just said you
Oh,
you
yeah,
need
yeah.
it's a self-preservation thing.
Yep.
You just you try to keep it in the back of your mind like this isn't real. She's going to
Yeah.
come back. She's going to keep eating it. It's great. It's
Yep.
you do that I think as a self-protection kind of a thing.
Yeah. But it's crazy. I think the conversation I had with hospice towards the end, well, I think it was probably within a week after she passed, and it's like I had another friend. He's just a couple years older than I am, and we're friends of their family, and he ended up going to hospice about a week after my mom passed, and then he passed away, and then it's like then you hear about this other person, and it's just when we say cancer truly affects everyone, it does. Even though I didn't have it in my family history and I hadn't experienced it with anyone super close to me, my friends that have gone through, breast cancer treatment and have beaten it. I mean, just like it does touch you, and it's not 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's 1 degree.
Yeah.
And that's everybody's journey is different too, which is really hard.
Yeah, but you brought up something too that I think that's something I have on a list of topics I want to talk about on the show sometime is the difference it makes when your care team is positive. And I don't think I think it's okay that they don't necessarily always tell you everything. It's crazy when I was diagnosed and they're like, they made it seem like this was going to be a breeze. They said,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. It's just a bump in the road. You're going to look back on this, years down the road and you're going to be like, ooh, that was a tough time, but I got through it and it was great. And so that's what I assumed it was going to be. I was going to get the chemo. I was going to beat cancer. It was going to be great. And I was done. And then when I actually beat cancer, they're like, whew, we thought you were probably going to die. I'm like, what? What? They're like, we're so happy that you had such a good result and that this was all great and that you were so successful because we weren't quite sure if you were going to make it. I'm like, well, thank God you didn't tell me that in the very beginning because I assumed I assumed it was going to be great. I didn't have any inkling.
Yeah, the power of positive thinking for sure.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And so I went into all my treatments thinking, this is a bump in the road. It's going to be easy. We're just going to get rid of it. It's going to be great. And crazy. Absolutely crazy.
And I think for again, everyone's cancer is slightly different. I think for me as a caretaker versus if I were in my mom's shoes, and again, my mom, my mom's listening to us, and I'm like, we're telling her the great, but I think as a caregiver, I just wanted, like, I don't know, this sounds more cold than it should, but my sister, again, living in California with these small kids, like, how can we plan? What does our next year to year and a half to possibly 3 years look like? My dad's physical health is not great. How can I juggle that? And my current life path, and so it was more about just having all the information. I am more like, let's get done what needs to be done right now. My sister is very much an analytical person. She's she's constantly like, I call it like, the death scrolling. You're just like doomsday scrolling all the time. And I'm like, okay, that's too much information for me. So she'd be sending me these things. I'd maybe read 1 out of every 10, articles, because kind of like you said, I needed the positive. I need to be able to stay at this level, and I can't right now, even to this day, like think about the negative parts. And for me, I would see her in a state where she was having a bad day, and I'm like, why are we trying to extend this? And then she bounced back, and I'm like, thank God I didn't, like, give up then. So yeah, it's very much the power of positive thinking. And I thought the Bismarck Cancer Center did a really good job. Amy Gross, who has become a friend of mine just because we do a lot with the Cancer
You
Center
do,
from a
yeah.
business
You do a lot of
standpoint.
fundraisers, yeah.
And it was never self-serving until it became self-serving, right?
Yeah.
So until my mom got her diagnosis. So I called Amy up and I just told her what was going on and asked her, because everybody's like, oh, well, you need to go to this hospital in this state. Well, that's not always feasible either, because I can't leave my life, and someone has to leave their life and bring the patient to these other hospitals. So
Yep.
and again, with this type of, with the glioblastoma, it's kind of like, you're just trying to extend the good life until you can't extend it anymore. And she was like, well, we have this doctor who's kind of the super positive, we have this doctor who's more frank, and then we have someone who's kind of middle of the road. And it was kind of nice to understand that, that's depends on who you are, might be what kind of doctor you prefer.
It is that fine line too, because you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to be too positive. Hey, things gonna be great, and you don't want to be the other side where you're dead tomorrow. You know what I mean? You don't want to have that come out.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things,
Yeah.
and that's the juggling act of, like for me, like I have thyroid cancer, it moved my lungs, and I probably have like a 98% survival rate, which is awesome. But still, in the back of your mind, you have cancer, and you're wondering what is next. Like I'm going through radiation treatments now, and everything changes every 6 months, and this and this. And it's just, like you said, that roller coaster of emotions of what do you do and who do you tell and how do you tell them and things like that.
Right.
So I'm sure people have reached out to you, because that's a crazy thing is too, once you're very public about your story and you're willing to talk to people, everybody that has nobody to talk to wants to talk to you about their family member who had cancer, or they have cancer, or whatever it might be. And that's hard because you're going through your own thing. And then now you're taking on other people's things too. Did you experience that as well, Shannon?
Well, I wouldn't say quite that way. I think what drove me a little like, okay, I can't deal with it was more like the advice giving, like, oh, my friend just did this. And that would be the one thing that my sister and I, were trying to stay cohesive in helping my mom and my dad. But it was like, oh, well, my friend's dad just died of this, and this is what they did. Well, I don't know that that's right for mom, though,
Yep.
And I just, so I think that part for me, just as my personality, I don't know that I got a lot of people that were experiencing it themselves necessarily. I mean, I felt a lot of support, but there was sometimes where my sister was going through her stuff, and it's like I need to stay more positive, and I can't hear about your friends. And I didn't mean to be disrespectful to her in her process. We just had different processes on how we were dealing with it. And so that was the part that was tough. It's like, okay, but your situation is different. This person survived and this was great. But I did reach out to someone, or someone reached out to me that her sister-in-law was going through the same thing, also had glioblastoma. But gosh, she's younger and she just had a baby. And it's like, oh my God, that's terrible. That's worse.
Right.
That's way worse, because that it's a terminal, and finding out how she went through things, and the cancer patient actually did reach out to me, and that was very valuable. Unfortunately, she also passed away, but she fought it for much longer, and was very good at like, hey, this worked, and just different things to ask the doctors, because sometimes in this whole process, which I'm sure both of you know, as great a caregiver as you guys can have around you, and as great of doctors and nurses, you're always still trying to be your best advocate, and you almost have to be a doctor yourself to ask the right questions. So that part was nice. So you do want like ideas and things to ask, but from other people who have gone through it.
I say it all the time. Medicine is a practice. They're practicing medicine, so you need to help. And that's one thing. When I had my diagnosis, I was like, well, what do I do about this? And somebody said something about this, and everybody has, like they said, everybody has an opinion. Everybody, like you said, you're 1 degree from someone else that may have had it or had cancer. And I think a lot of people think about once you have cancer, whether it's thyroid cancer, ovarian cancer, or whatever cancer, it's all the same, but it's not, because it's a lot of different things. So you have to ask those doctors those questions, and they may not have the right answer for you, but at least you're getting that support staff on the outside too.
Right.
And we did talk to Shannon. It's funny you said you were talking about how people approach you and be like, "Oh, my dad just died of cancer. My mom just died of cancer." I'm like, "Oh, I hate that."
Not helpful.
No, we've talked about that now twice on our shows. If anybody takes anything away from this show that we're doing, I hope it's the fact that if somebody somebody diagnosed with cancer, please do not tell them all the people you know that have just died of cancer. We
Right.
don't want to hear. I'm sorry it happened, but I don't want to hear about the 15 people in your life that just died of cancer as we're going through that.
Going through it,
the situation right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's 100% misery loves company, I feel
Yep.
like, and I've tried to like be patient with it, and they want to get it off their chest, and I totally get it, but yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, and I haven't been in the shoes that you are in. I'm just. It was just it was my mom going through it, and not me not knowing if I'm going to survive this thing or not. And so, yeah, you need to stay positive for sure.
Yeah. So
Positive.
do you have any advice for people now that just had a family diagnosed? Is there anything
you
that you
said,
came
don't give
across?
any advice,
I
Tony.
know, right? Is there anything that you felt was helpful that you might want to let people know? I mean, that's a good one, is just take everybody's advice with a grain of salt.
I guess the biggest thing I learned is the difference between hospice care and palliative care. And I think that's there's like a whole misnomer there. Like, I didn't know exactly what hospice care meant. I thought that meant you are definitely going to die. And that's not necessarily the case either. And she saw a palliative care doctor before. I mean, we knew she was going to die, right? Because she's got terminal cancer. And I guess unless there was some miracle that happened in science, it was going to happen. Just we didn't know when. But that was the biggest thing, is like, well, what do you mean you can't have 24-hour care in hospice? Well, that's not what it is. And, what do you mean? What do you mean she can go out of palliative care into hospice care and back to palliative care? And I think that was the biggest like brain tease I've had all my life, is hospice means you're going to die, and it doesn't. It's like the caregivers, they're the ones kind of in charge of like what kind of medications, any kind of counseling. If there's a religious aspect that you can find, they're helping the family members through it. But palliative care also does that. It's just hospice care. You're not fighting the disease anymore.
Right.
You're just, if you're going to get better, it's only your own body that's going to fight it. Like, they'll give you something that's comfortable, that makes you comfortable. So for my mom, going into hospice definitely meant we were like giving up. And it's not giving up. It's kind of back to this, humans are not dogs, but it's like trying to give them the best humane way to end their life. Or if their body heals itself, then they go back into palliative care. And I think that was the biggest thing. I was like, oh, they're not there all the time. They're, I just didn't know what it meant, hospice versus, I didn't even know what palliative care was at all.
Well, and we actually talked about that too this would have been a couple episodes ago, when my doctors brought up I should go see a palliative care specialist. I'm like, I didn't realize I was dying. And they're like, no, you're not. Palliative care is just helpful caregivers. Like, if you are sick and you can't, like after your surgery, they might be helpful because you might not be able to get to your doctor's appointment. They'll come to you. Or if you can't get to the store, they can find somebody to help get you to the store to get your medications. So they're caregivers. They're not just like end of life things, which is when a lot of cancer patients get referred to palliative care, they don't want to talk to them because they feel like they've given up or it's the end. And it's not. They're like, no, you're fine. But these are just helpful people. They're like the DoorDash of the medical field.
It's like the touchy-feely part. It's the touchy-feely part that everybody needs that's going through the like medicinal part of it. So yeah,
absolutely.
I just wish someone would have given me like, okay, this is that, like a guidebook in that way. And it was the process of, as a caregiver to my mom, and someone trying to take her to the appointments and trying to do the right thing for her, not having been through this before. It was just kind of like the discovering of what each piece was.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that had my mom, like, she's got to go see a doctor, an oncologist at this place, but Bismarck Cancer Center does the radiation. Like, I didn't even know that exactly. So, and I've been working with the Cancer Center for a very long time and still didn't understand what they did until I understood what they did, unfortunately.
Yeah, I wonder if that's something that you bring up. Like, I don't want to say there's like a brochure or a pamphlet for it, but like that's be like a guide of, here, like you have cancer. Here's what this is, and have like the definitions of things as you go through it, because that'd be a total help for whatever you're going through.
When I got diagnosed, I got a binder that I kept, and we call it a battle binder. When I went to CHI, it's like a battle binder, and it gives resources. But the thing that I think is frustrating is, for as small a city as Bismarck is, there's not a lot of communication between Sanford, CHI, the cancer center. I still, going through cancer, all my treatments, I still don't know what Bismarck Cancer Center really does. And I just know they do a little bit. I know people that have done radiation there, but I still don't know what is offered. And people have asked me, is there a place that takes wigs? Is there a place that donates wigs? I don't know. Is there a place where can people stay if they're coming into town besides Ronald McDonald House? I'm like, I don't know. Is there a place? There's all these questions that people have, and nobody, like, there's not a resource you can go to where they're just like, this is all of the resources in your area. I feel like every area should have all the resources listed. Like, where do you buy wigs? People still ask me, where do you buy wigs? I'm like, I don't know, online. I had to find that out through somebody who said you should check out Chelsea Smith. Otherwise, I just was going to go down to Merle Norman and buy a wig. That's the only place I knew in town that had wigs. And then everyone's like, oh, there's all these other places too. And you can get wig styled here and you can get wig styled there. And there's one place in town where she'll cut them and style them. But none of that is in one central resource. And I think you're right. That's really hard, which is why we kind of started the show, is we wanted to try to give people resources to check out that they don't know exist. So,
and not just in Bismarck, Canada, but around everywhere. Like, if you listen to us somewhere else, in your local area, call that place and say, hey, where do I find this info?
Yeah.
And we received a binder, of sorts as well. And what's really difficult, and part of my experience too comes from like the softball tournament and the charity donations that we do, and we have this banquet. So I know, there's Ronald McDonald House, but there's also Tracy Sanctuary House.
Yeah.
So and I do think Bismarck Cancer Center can help you with some of those resources. However, if you have the kind of cancer that doesn't need radiation and you only you only need chemo, you're not going to the Bismarck Cancer Center.
Yeah.
So the Bismarck Cancer Center is funded, privately from both hospitals. But they're only doing radiation. But they do have also a lot of guidance and a lot of things that they do from the foundation standpoint, to help the caregivers, the people that have to come in from out of town, things like that. But you're right, there isn't like one central. I'm sure if you called them, they would probably have a couple places that did wigs, but they wouldn't have the laundry list. The other problem with that is we were given, it was basically like senior care, or, like who can go to my parents' house and help my mom bathe, because some of that happens through the hospital folks, but some of it you need to go pay out of pocket to get that done.
Yep.
And all of those resources, like 2 or 3 pages worth of them in the state of North Dakota and then locally to Bismarck Van. And you know what? They don't have the staff. They can't take on new patients. They might be shut down. So just keeping up that list would be pretty exhaustive. So while I wish we had this list of things, unfortunately, the world we live in, it's not really feasible to make it accurate. So that's also what I learned, is that the world needs a lot more nurses.
100%. Yeah, especially now that there's a whole, here in the Bismarck-Bandit area, one whole hospital just shut down their cancer center. So I had my first appointment with my new doctor yesterday, and we have to start all over again. And it's just like, it's maddening. It's maddening. There seems to be more people diagnosed with cancer and less resources. It's just, it's frustrating.
And that is levels above my brain.
It's way above our pay grade.
Ditto.
Yes.
Ditto. Yeah.
Well, Shannon, thank you. We do appreciate the time, and we wish you all the best. And you've been awesome.
Wish you guys
for a
the
long
best.
Time. Yeah, thank you.
Way to
and
be
maybe
fighters.
Next time we can chat softball. It'd be a little more lighter conversation.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll chat McQuade softball tourney. Way easier to talk about.
Hey, I held it together pretty well. So.
You
did
did.
awesome.
You
Yeah.
did. I warned Bob a little bit. I'm like, this is going to be tough for Shannon. I mean, she just lost her
Yeah.
mom, and and she warned me. She's like, I don't know how this is going to go, but we'll see.
You're awesome.
I was
No.
Way
having
to
a
go.
bad day. I mean, it's just like days. So I had a bad day yesterday, but today I tried to
Yeah.
pull my stuff together.
Coaster.
Yeah.
Well, Chelsea Smith Cosmetics sponsors Cancer Convos. Easy for me to say. We thank you for joining us this week, and hopefully
Melatonin, melanoma.
melatonin. I'm take some of both. Yes, we'll be fine.
I need more
Have a great
sleep
week.
for sure.
Melatonin.
Oh, all right.
Does that
Thanks,
come in
Shannon.
10 milligrams or
Thanks, guys.
15 milligrams? All right, Shannon. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going 15. Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
Bye.
See ya.
See ya.